Welcome to Bonds After Baby. I'm LMFT Evie Empress, and I'm here to help you and your family relationships experience more relief and connection during the stage of pregnancy, postpartum, and early parenthood. Remember to subscribe for my podcast here and on YouTube and sign up to my email list on my website, bondsafterbaby.com, for free resources for your family. In this episode, I'm getting more in depth on what kind of relationship struggles I help with in early parenthood and how it can help you. So we know so much goes into prepping for a new child, right? The logistical stuff we're familiar with. The crib and toys, the car seats, researching daycares, helping kids with their milestones. And yet, family cohesion, family preparedness, and functioning isn't on our radar as much as a culture. And yet the family climate is the ultimate environment that you're going to be experiencing, your loved ones will be affected by as you navigate changes, responsibilities, stressors, and joys. And it's also the ultimate environment your child will be welcomed into and impacted by. And what kind of environment do you as parents want that to be? Growing a family is an experience to be shared, to share in the joy and the struggle. Again, this is not an individual process, it's a family one. So I'm going to start by running through the major hitters of what moms and parents go through in this stage, what I see most often. And I'll give a few examples of like how much relief and joy can come when relationships are equipped to cope. Here are some of the most common stressors that most moms and families go through. Whether it's your first or fourth child, there is a physical and hormonal transition if you're the bio mom, and recovery, which is just so much in itself. And even if you're the non-birth parent or an adoptive parent, there's a major adjustment still, right? There is a new member into a family system. Each member takes on a different role, which requires a shifting of roles, identities, responsibilities, expectations of yourself, and expectations from others. The lack of sleep alone is enough to affect relationships, okay? But if we take lack of sleep, increased caregiving for someone else's needs, less time for yourself and your relationship, less time for your own needs. Again, that's a lot in itself. It's a lot. And not only this, but what if there are other stressors on top, which there often are? Work, financial, health, other members of family going through issues or crises like your partner or, your child's sibling or a parent. You might be caregiving older parents. And maybe there was a trauma involved in your pregnancy or birth experience that requires emotional recovery. You could have feeding struggles, infant or child temperament, navigating different cultural or religious traditions in one family. I could go on. There's limitless factors that can be stressors. And we know, couples go through a lot. Emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy can take a hit. Co-parenting struggles are stressful, right? When there's different approaches and mindsets about child rearing, it can, cause conflict. Relationships with your parents and in-laws and the way couples navigate such extended family relationships can be very stressful as well. So there's just a lot to navigate here and potential for the weight of various pressures and troubles. And it's just not possible to eliminate all stressors and conflict. It's not. So then it becomes about how are we going to cope with this, right? If we continue to see mom stress, parenting stress as an individual issue, it's like saying, okay, figure out individual coping methods on your own, okay? But do we want to be on our own in this? Do we want any of our family members to feel like they're on their own in this time? Do we want that for ourselves? And would you want that for your child? So what is the ultimate goal here? What I keep seeing is that there's a deep longing in this stage to be seen for your contributions and struggles, cared for, offered compassion, and to be able to give compassion without walls and barriers. And I've seen that when relationships find different ways of meeting needs and showing up for each other, even in the simplest ways, the soothing that happens, the reduction of symptoms like anxiety, depression, just difficulty adjusting is incredible. And it happens faster than with individual treatment. If you imagine your family as an interconnected web, like the energy and dynamics are circular and reverberate off one another, We're just not experiencing distress in a vacuum. Sometimes the distress is coming from relationship stuff, or it can be made easier with relationship closeness, or it can be made harder when there's contention. So I'm just going to give a really brief, kind of familiar example of how the whole system functions as this interconnected web looping together. So imagine if you come home and you had a really stressful day at work, and there was something, a favor you had asked your partner to do for you, and it was like time sensitive. It had to be done by this day, and it's not. Okay, it didn't get done. And you're just so frustrated, exhausted, disappointed. And then there's tension because your partner ends up thinking like, God, I'm just being criticized. I'm never enough. I tried my best. And then you guys get into a loop of that, right? When there's that tension, there might be some discomfort in actually working it out or discussing it in a productive way. And some of that anger gets displaced, gets put on your child that's in the room. And there's some punchiness or rudeness with your child. Then the child acts out, right? Whether it's a baby or an older child, they pick up on tension. So there might be, let's say, some extra fussiness or acting out or a tantrum or something. And then this can be a loop. When stuff like that happens, or it happens often, it might start eroding or stripping the kind of confidence in parenting, or bring up some like anxiety thoughts about what's going on with our child, which just keeps increasing the tension. And it can continue to just be a loop of unhelpful thoughts, anxiety thoughts, back and forth, and driving behaviors that you just don't want to be having with each other, okay, that aren't helpful. And this is just one little example of how a feedback loop can just keep feeding into kind of negativity in the dynamic. So imagine if your family had more awareness and understanding over what's helpful versus what makes things harder. The simplest gestures can release so much tension and increase emotional warmth in a home. That's the kind of environment you want for yourself and your child, right? So I want to go back to an example I used in the first podcast episode. And if you didn't hear that, basically when my husband and I were coming home from the hospital after my second birth, our child had to be in the NICU for a long time. And so when I got discharged, we had to go home empty-handed without our baby. It was a really, really horrible day. And I just remember so strongly that moment in the parking garage when I started to spiral and have very dark thoughts. And imagine if my husband had said to me at that time, this is not what he said, but imagine if he had said, Evie, you got to get it together. It's not that big of a deal. We'll see him tomorrow in the morning. And, make sure you don't start freaking out because we've got our daughter at home and she can't be seeing you like this. Okay. So if he had said this to me, right, it just would have made it harder, much harder for me in that moment. Okay. I was already feeling badly, and that would have just made me feel completely unheard and dismissed, and like I'm doing something wrong by, having a hard time. And even just saying those words out loud, like I feel tension in my body. Oh, it just would have felt horrible to hear those words. But what he said to me instead was basically, this is horrible. Look, we're in it together. You're such an amazing mom. We'll get through this together. Let's go home. We're going to be okay. And again, just saying those words reminds me of how calming and soothing that moment was and what he offered me. And, it's reciprocal. When we receive things like that from our partners, from loved ones, God, it's almost like we want to give like tenfold what they've given us. So there's something contagious too about that kind of grace to be given. And this is one little example. It was like 2 sentences he said to me, right? There are endless opportunities in families to help soothe one another. And when people feel calmer and seen, there's so much more space for playfulness and connection and grace. So I'm going to run through the kind of relationship struggles I hear about a lot in pregnancy and early parenthood and see if any of this sounds familiar to you. With couples, it's very common that emotional and sexual intimacy and closeness starts to fade. That partners can get very defensive when trying to approach, like if you're trying to approach your partner with your needs or when you've been disappointed, you can be met with a lot of defensiveness and lashing out or avoidance. Having a hard time hearing feedback yourself without feeling like it's a threat or attack. Arguing over how to handle in law issues, and ultimately getting adversarial as if you're like on opposing teams rather than on the same team when conflicts come up. And then wanting to work things out but avoiding it because when you guys try it, it makes things worse. I hear that a lot. Resentment about how responsibilities are shared, not feeling appreciated. And with your own parents, experiencing a lot of criticism and judgment, like from the grandparents, they the grandparents can often feel like there's this passive attack on them or judgment on them when their kids choose to raise their children differently, and they can react to that in different ways. Expectations of roles of the grandparents can be very different between what you're expecting, what the grandparents were expecting. And, it's hard when there's increased tension with grandparents, with your parents, or extended family members at a time when you really need help and reassurance. Another thing that comes up a lot is that our own childhoods as parents and the impact of how we were parented can really unearth as we become parents and become really tender for us to connect with as we step into a parent role. And sometimes a lot of grief comes up at how you may be giving your kids something you didn't get to receive. In this podcast, I'll be getting into many more very specific situations regarding couple connection and intimacy, getting more in depth on all this and giving tips. How to handle arguments, how to have hard conversations, getting more comfortable reaching out to loved ones, showing up the way we want to, not just like how we can, right, in survival mode, but how we really want to show up for members of our family and ourselves. Tips on your relationship with your parents when kids come, and a lot more. So I'm curious if these are some familiar themes here for you and your family. If there's something different that you'd like to share, you can, add in the comments here on YouTube. And, if you can just start asking these questions, would you like to be able to be more authentic with less defensiveness? Do you want to manage your own reactivity to show up in a more open way and calm way? And what kind of climate do you want to be in and raise your children in? What strengths do you notice you have as a family? Where do you see that you guys really bring it when things get rough? How do you enjoy each other? So please go ahead and comment on my YouTube channel or send a message on my website. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you join me here at Bonds After Baby. It's time for you to enjoy more connection and less conflict during this special time in your family's life. And if you want all the resources at your fingertips, I'm offering freebie goodies in the near future. So you might want to sign up for my email list at Bonds After Baby to get the goods and subscribe. My third episode is already up, and it gives a brief explanation of my unique approach and why it's so effective. So wishing your family the best, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.